조선의 10월입니다. 환희로운 경축의 밤입니다. 이 시각 저 멀리 조국방선 하늘 땅 바다 초소에 미도운 장병들과 도시와 마을들, 굴지의 공장들과 협동벌, 탄광들과 광산, 어촌들과 교정들에서도 이 나라 천만 아들 딸들이 경건히 우러르며 마음 달려오는 여기 수도의 경축광장입니다. 영광과 자긍 넘치는 위대한 밤 10월 명절의 밤이거니 우리 얼마나 간과한 경난들을 이기며 여기까지 왔던가. 더듬어 볼수록 추억 뜨겁고 새겨 볼수록 한없는 긍지의 가슴 부풀어 이 밤에로 달려온 길들을 돌이켜 봅니다. 역사의 한 시각이 한나라 한민족의 장래를 결정하기도 합니다. 해방 후 처음으로 맞이한 조선의 10월, 우리의 붉은 당기가 힘차게 나부끼기 시작한 역사의 그날이 찬란한 오늘을 안아왔습니다. 못 잊을 그날에 위대한 힘과 부흥으로 저놈 떨칠 내조국의 앞날이 기약됐습니다. 전변의 시대, 전환의 시대, 강국의 시대, 참으로 영광스러운 75년이 흘렀습니다. 허나 그 길에는 조국과 혁명 인민의 운명을 지켜 피와 눈물과 고뇌를 걸음걸음 찍으며 약진의 대로를 한치 한치 열어간 우리 당의 천신만고가 역력히 새겨져 있습니다. 그래서 이 밤을 밝히는 저 밝음에 우리 당이 헤쳐온 세월의 모진 눈비들이 비껴오고 천만 밤을 지새온 샹도의 그 불빛들이 오려와 우리 눈곱 뜨겁게 젖어드는 것이 아닙니까? 지셀 줄 모르는 열정의 밤은 위대한 힘으로 더 높이 솟구쳐 오를 내 조국의 찬란한 아침을 부르고 있습니다.
잠시 후 여기 수도 평양 김일성 광장에서는 조선노동당 창건 75돌 경축 열병식이 거행되게 됩니다. 오늘의 열병광장은 해방 후 정기적 혁명 무력의 탄생을 선포하던 역사의 그날, 마차에 기관총을 메우고 나아가던 청소한 우리 인민군대가 당의 령도 밑에 얼마나 거대한 힘을 비축하였는가를 감회 깊이 돌이켜보는 추억과 감동의 뜻깊은 장소로 될 것입니다. 이번 열병식에는 명예기병 상징 종대를 선두로 53개의 도보 종대와 22개의 기계화 종대, 총 75개의 열병 종대가 참가하게 됩니다. 열병 종대마다 지니고 있는 부대의 전통과 위훈을 합치면 당의 령도 따라 우리의 혁명적 무장력이 걸어온 자랑찬 승리의 역사가 될 것입니다. 기억도 생생합니다. 할아버지 세대로 불리우는 정규 무력의 첫 열병식 참가자들이 원자탄과 맞서야 했던 무기는 보병총에 불과했습니다. 그러나 오늘의 열병식에 참가하게 될 그들의 손자 세대는 너무도 변했고 누구도 상상 못할 힘을 가지고 세상에 그것을 과시하게 됩니다.
지금 이 시각 우리 당의 창건자이시며 건설자이신 위대한 수령 김일성 동지와 위대한 영도자 김종일 동지께서 경축광장을 굽어보시며 우리 모두에게 따뜻한 축복을 보내실 것입니다. 온 세계가 주체조선의 강대성이 힘있게 시위될 이 광장을 지켜보고 있을 것입니다. 1945년 10월 10일로부터 2020년 10월 10일 75성상 27,392일이 흘렀습니다. 우리 당이 조국과 인민을 이끌어 이 광장까지 오는 길은 결코 순탄치 않았습니다. 간관 초행길도 있었습니다. 불타는 강을 건널 때도 있었습니다. 폭풍치는 언덕에 나설 때도 있었습니다. 어찌하여 우리 당이 참기 어려운 고난 속에서도 정때 많은 억색에 들어줘야 했고 형언할 수 없는 도전 광풍에 부닥치면서도 전쟁 억제력을 다지고 또 다져야 했습니까? 이제 우리는 인민의 감 높은 지위와 존엄을 만대로 담보해줄 억척의 지지점이 무엇이며 인민에게 줄 수 있는 사랑 중에 제일 큰 사랑이 과연 어떤 것인가를 위대한 어머니의 역사 속에서 뜨겁게 안아보게 됩니다. 지금 관중들의 환호 속에 오늘의 열병식 조악을 맡은 국무위원회 연주단과 조선인민군 군악단이 광장에 입장하고 있습니다.
Hi, good evening from Seoul. If you are tuning into this YouTube stream, my name is Chad O'Carroll. I'm the CEO of Korea Risk Group, which is the producer of NK News, a specialist North Korea-focused publication. We have been waiting for hours for this military parade to start. It's a very unusual set of circumstances today. Normally these military parades from North Korea are shown from about 9 a.m. till about 11:30 a.m. But today it appears that the parade took place very late night, maybe between midnight and 2 a.m. So this is a very special program today. We've not done this before, but after a suggestion from one of our readers, we thought it'd be good to bring together some of our analysts to make sense of the parade as it happens live. So we've got three guests with me today. I'll just ask them to introduce themselves quickly. Ankit, Panda, do you want to introduce yourself? Just let people know who you are.
Sure, thanks, Chad. I'm Ankit Panda. I'm author of the recent book Kim Jong-un and the Bomb, Survival and Deterrence in North Korea, and a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Happy to be here.
Great, and we've also got Jeongmin Kim here.
Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Jeongmin Kim, Seoul correspondent in K News, and I'll be monitoring Kim Jong-un's post.
And we've also got from the Netherlands, Joost Oliemans. Would you like to introduce yourself, Joost?
Hi, Chad. I'm Joost, and together with my co-author, we just wrote a book on the North Korean armed forces, which is called North Korea's Armed Forces on the Path of Jeongmin. And I regularly write for a variety of websites and news agencies on the DPRK's armed forces.
Great, thanks everyone. So we're currently seeing what seems to be a mixture of video clipped together of various aspects of the parade. It's unclear yet if we're going to be seeing the full show or if this is a very polished, shortened production. Ankit, can you just tell us about the significance of today and like why so many people are interested in watching this parade, just to start out?
Sure. I mean, so we had a very good idea of what was happening with North Korea's nuclear forces in 2017, of course, when we were seeing strategic missile tests every couple of weeks, or at least what felt like every couple of weeks that year. And of course, the April 15th, 2017 military parade on Kim Il-sung's birthday, Day of the Sun, was unforgettable for a variety of reasons. I mean, it was the first time North Korea showed off as much as it had. We did get two parades since then, one in February 2018, which was also remarkable for including the Hwasong-15, their largest ever missile. And we got a much more modest parade in September 2018. While diplomacy was ongoing, North Korea effectively quote, denuclearized that parade. It basically showed off no systems that were nuclear capable. This is the first parade really since February 2018, when we're expecting to see updates on what they've been working for. So a good chance to display qualitative and quantitative progress and expanding not only their nuclear forces, but their conventional forces. So I think there'll be a lot to see here. Certainly already we can tell that this is something that they've taken care to present with a particular aesthetic, given that it is taking place at night and looks really unlike any other North Korean parade I've ever seen so far.
Yeah, and so we were hearing from our sources in Pyongyang all through the day that they had heard fighter jets flying over Pyongyang sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. Sounds of heavy tanks, equipment moving around. And this also follows back on Tuesday earlier this week. We had similar reports that 3-4 a.m. people were woken up in the community of foreigners living in Pyongyang with the sounds of very loud noises of military equipment moving around. Joost, can you just give us some insight? Are parades at night common in the military world? And like, what do you think would motivate the North Koreans to parade at night?
I think they're not particularly common in the military world. I mean, your purpose is to show off whatever equipment you have and showcase it to the general public as well. Well, most people ordinarily wouldn't show up at night, of course. But in a country like North Korea, that's no problem, since you can just order most of your population to attend. But in the DPRK, we have had some parades in the past, like very small military defilades where just the vehicles were passing through quickly, but also massive torchlight parades, which were more civilian in nature. So they do have somewhat of a history with this, but a military parade of this scale, that's definitely unique.
Yeah, it's definitely strange. We have just heard from inside North Korea that at around 6:30 tonight, noises of fireworks could be heard, which could be related to the torch parades, which you mentioned earlier. We saw photos several weeks ago of large numbers of youth and children rehearsing for torch parades in Kim Il-sung Square in the center of the town. And usually those two events are segmented and separate. So we would have a military parade early in the day, followed by a torch parade later at night. And it could be that right now, though we're seeing this edited selection of video from early hours this morning, that the torch parade is actually going on as we speak in Pyongyang. Joost, is there any particular military equipment you're on the lookout at this particular parade? Anything that you've been tracking to see if it may emerge?
Well, there's definitely a couple of new pieces of equipment which either featured in few parades in the past or which are slated to feature during this one. That includes a whole host of ballistic missiles which they tested in the 2018 period. But what I'm also spotting just directly from the few images we're seeing is that a lot of the personal equipment of KPA soldiers appears to have been upgraded quite a lot. So I think they're really going to go across the board on innovations this year.
What kind of upgrades have you seen so far?
I'm seeing some new body armor, new helmets also, and it would appear that some of their assault rifles, the Type 88, is what they use, which is an AK-74 variant. They have a very bulky new muzzle flash hider of some sort. So it's a bit blurry thus far, but I'd definitely say there have been a lot of changes in their personal equipment.
So what we're seeing right now is video of troops parading, playing music, things like that. Just for those of you who are new to the world of North Korean military parades, we normally see those at the start of the parade, followed by infantry coming through in blocks of units. And after that, we tend to see a slow build-up, a slow and steady build-up of smaller, wheeled vehicles leading up to tanks, leading up to artillery and rocket systems, short, medium, long-range ballistic missiles. So it looks like the video production has gone from a sort of highlights package at the start now to potentially the full show. So we could be in for a solid hour or 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours of coverage now, which will presumably culminate in potentially a form of new ballistic missile being shown. Jeongmin, have you any thoughts about how this is going from a South Korean perspective? Like what's been the mood in Seoul today?
It was original and people expected that it will happen this morning. And this is all coming after all the tension in inter-Korean relations after the South Korean government worker passed away in the North Korean waters. It was kind of split this week, people anticipating the military parade. On one hand, some people were worried that perhaps new news coming out of Pyongyang this weekend will overshadow what has been going on until now. But on the other hand, people were also already expecting new ICBMs, SLBMs, and TLs to be revealed in the military parade today. JCS and the Ministry of National Defense, they have been talking about it for a while now with the lawmakers during the audit this week and beforehand as well. So it was expected that it is going to go ahead today, but I don't think anybody expected that it's going to go ahead at night, which is very unprecedented.
That's right. The other thing is that we are, it's been very vague as to when this parade would start. We've had no information at all from the North Koreans, which is completely normal. I've reported on these parades a few times in Pyongyang, and even though everyone knows that we've been invited to the country as journalists to cover the parade, even until the very morning itself, be it 6-7 a.m., and we've gone through all the security, there is still no clue that we're going to a military parade. Our North Korean host will say we don't know what's going on, that it's just an important event. So it is, it's always kept very vague. Just if you're tuning in right now, this is the NK News, NK Pro live stream of North Korea's 75th anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea. We are a specialist North Korea website focusing on North Korea. Been doing it for about 10 years now, and I'm very happy to be joined by some of my colleagues right now. Ankit Panda, who's calling in from New York City very, very early in the morning. We've got Joost Oliemans from the Netherlands, who's a author of a recent book on North Korea's military, and Jeongmin Kim, who is a Seoul correspondent for NK News. So Ankit, you've been watching North Korea's WMD program for a while. Like, what would you say is the sort of biggest, or how significant would you say it is? Is it a real threat to the United States right now, or is that threat still far away?
Well, threats you can make sense of as capabilities plus attention, and the capabilities that North Korea has demonstrated, particularly in 2017 when it conducted 3 flight tests of intercontinental range ballistic missiles, 2 Hwasong-14s and 1 Hwasong-15 in November 2017, North Korea showed that it could deliver a nuclear weapon to the U.S. homeland, and that was a significant milestone. So that capability, I think, was something manifestly and qualitatively new that year. So at this point, what the North Koreans can show us is qualitative refinements to that capability. So better ICBMs, larger ICBMs capable of carrying multiple warheads, multiple reentry vehicles, or they could demonstrate the refinement of their nuclear strike capability in theater in Northeast Asia. They have a wide range of systems that are designed specifically to hold U.S. military bases in East Asia, including in Korea and in Japan at risk. So we may learn more about those systems. Something I'm looking for in particular is evidence of quantitative growth, which, pre-parade satellite imagery suggests that the North Koreans are going to parade more transporter reactor launchers, or TELs, that's the launch vehicles for ballistic missiles. They're going to parade more than they ever have before. So that, I think, will be an interesting evolution of the threat from North Korea, since we'll make discussions about things like preemption, deterrence in the United States, South Korea and Japan are very different. It matters if North Korea has 4 to 6 ICBMs versus if they have, let's say, 10 plus, 15 plus today.
I am seeing from the YouTube comments, I'm seeing some questions whether or not this is live or if this was pre-recorded. To me, it seems it was pre-recorded and edited, and there were intelligence sources telling South Korean military earlier that it seems it went ahead last night.
Yeah, that's right. All our sources, like you can see the time there, midnight. That's the fireworks parade that we heard about from people in Pyongyang. So clearly, this was done last night. It's not live, but we're just seeing here comes Kim Jong-un in a Western-style suit. That's interesting because we haven't seen him in a Western-style suit in the parade most recently. But my colleague Jeongmin is requesting I be quiet for a moment while we just listen into what the North Korean hosts are saying. So yeah, that's Kim Jong-un entering with his trademark music. You can hear all the crowd shouting applause for him. It's really quite incredible when you're there in person. People suddenly, like a bolt of lightning has gone into them, just wake up and start cheering very, very vividly when he comes in, and we can see that happening now. Another thing I should point out, so the parade stand, the observing area that Kim Jong-un is on right now, this is a new structure. The parade viewing stand for the last 10 plus military parades has been torn down earlier this year in a very elaborate, you can see marble there behind him. It looks like they've built a very elaborate new facility for him to talk. I'm going to shut up now while Kim introduces himself.
하늘땅을 진감하는 저 만세의 환호, 수명숭배의 저 폭발, 누구나 가슴속에 꽉 차있는 생각. 얼마나 기다려왔습니까? 위대한 당신을 모시기 위해 얼마나 기다려온 이 영광의 순간입니까? 김정은 동지, 영광을 드립니다. 최대의 경의를 삼가드립니다. 10월의 밤하늘가를 붉게 물들이며 터져오르는 저 척포, 천지를 침감하는 만세의 환호. 이 나라를 지켜주시고 인종만의 운명을 열어주신 인민의 보고이, 인민의 위대한 용도자를 우러러 이 나라 인민이 덧대려는
It seems that Kim Jong-un may give a speech, so we will listen in.
창제적인 예주와 비범한 용도로 우리 당을 태양의 조남으로 빛나는 주체의 혁명적 당, 인민의 삶과 행복과 미래를 지켜주는 어머니 당으로 강화 발전시키시고.
Another interesting observation, you can see no masks being worn by any of the attendees in this parade, nor the military. It suggests there's a lot of confidence in North Korea right now about the COVID situation. I'm going to be quiet again. It looks like Kim's about to speak. We will, when Kim delivers his speech, we're going to keep quiet, and then we'll give you a quick summary from Jeongmin, who will be translating and just give you an insight into what he's saying.
중앙연회의 정치국 상무위원회 위원이며 당중앙군사위원회 부위원장이며 당중앙연회 부위원장인 리병철 동지, 조선노동당 중앙연회 정치국 상무위원회 위원이며 조선민주주의인민공화국 내각 총리인 김덕훈 동지, 조선노동당 중앙연회 정치국 상무위원회 위원이며 조선민주주의인민공화국 공무위원회 부위원장이며 당중앙연회 부위원장인 박봉주 동지가 주속단에 자리 잡았습니다. 김재령 동지, 리일한 동지, 최희 동지, 박태덕 동지, 김용철 동지를 비롯한 당중앙 지도기관 성원들이 주속단에 나왔습니다. 박정천 동지, 김수길 동지, 김종관 동지를 비롯한 군부의 지휘 성원들이 주속단에 나왔습니다. 당과 정부, 군부에서 오랜 기간 사업한 로 간부들이 초대석에 자리 잡았습니다. 초대석에는 조선노동당 장군 75돌 경축 대표들이 자리 잡고 있었습니다.
So yeah, as I was saying, this is Chad O'Carroll, by the way, from NK News. You can see no one is wearing any mask, and this really does seem to suggest that the country is very confident that it is indeed COVID-free. There's been a lot of question marks as to whether there could be coronavirus in North Korea, but as one precaution, almost 2 months before this parade started taking place, the North completely tightened its existing shutdown of the country. They implemented shoot to kill orders within a 1 to 2 kilometer range along the borders of China and South Korea. And as some of you will know, there was a recent evidence of this in the sense that a South Korean who was trying to allegedly defect to North Korea by swimming was shot several hours after he arrived in North Korea and killed. These are all thought to be part of North Korea's very intensive efforts to keep coronavirus out of the country before this parade. Mainly, we believe, so that the parade itself doesn't act as a kind of super spreader event. If there is one person at this parade or 2 people who are infected with coronavirus, it could be extremely damaging for the legitimacy and reputation of the Workers' Party of Korea. So every precaution has been taken thus far, but it's very interesting to see, paradoxically, that there are no masks being worn here.
지위에 올려 세워준 위대한 당에 드리는 인민의 탐없는 찬가의 미알입니다.
When the officials were being introduced by KCTV just moments ago, you could see how some of the officials that recently rose to stardom, such as Ri Byung-chul. Speech is starting.
국가 무력의 최고 영도자 김정은 동지께서 연설하시겠습니다.
경사스러운 10월 명절을 맞이한 온 나라 전체의 인민들과 인민군 장병들, 사회안전군 장병들과 노농조위군, 붉은 청년군의대 대원들, 당 창건 75돌 경축 대표들과 평양시민 여러분, 영광스러운 10월 명절 열병식에 참가한 열병부대 지휘관 전투원 동무들, 친애하는 동지들, 영광스러운 우리 당 창건절이 왔습니다. 위대한 영광의 밤을 맞이했습니다. 왜서인지 유례없이 간고했던 이해에 맞는 당 창건절은 이 영광의 밤이 드디어 왔다는 사실만으로도 너무도 감격스럽습니다. 위대한 우리 당 창건 75을 맞으며 나는 조선노동당 중앙위원회를 대표하여 오늘의 10월 명절을 크나큰 영광과 긍지로 빛내인 모든 분들에게 중심으로 되는 축하의 인사를 드립니다. 전체 우리 인민에게 뜨거운 감사와 축하의 인사를 삼가드립니다. 동지들, 위대한 명절의 이 밤 수도의 거리들과 여기 영광의 광장은 이렇듯 환희롭고 기쁨과 긍지로 설레이지만 오늘의 이 영광의 순간이 지금 전국 각지의 수많은 당원 동지들과 노동계급들, 우리 혁명군대 장병들이 보이지 않는 노력과 헌신에 의해 지켜지고 있다는 것을 우리 잊지 말아야 합니다. 오늘의 이 영광의 순간을 안아오고 지키기 위해 올해에 들어와 얼마나 많은 분들이 혹독한 환경을 인내하며 분투해 왔습니까? 우리가 얼마나 많은 도전들을 이겨내며 여기까지 왔습니까? 특히 올해 예상치 않게 맞닿은 방역전선과 자연재해 복구전선에서 우리 인민군 장병들이 발휘한 애국적이고 영웅적인 헌신은 누구든 감사의 눈물 없이는 대할 수 없는 것들입니다. 조국보위, 인민보위, 혁명보위가 인민군대의 마땅한 본연의 임무라고는 하겠지만 우리 장병들의 고생이 너무도 컸습니다. 너무도 많은 것을 맡아 안고 고생도 많은 우리 장병들입니다. 그래서 너무도 미안하고 이 영광의 밤에 그들 모두와 함께 있지 못한 것이 마음이 아픕니다. 바로 지금 이 시각에도 수많은 우리 군대 장병들이 영광의 이 김일성 광장에 오지 못하고 국가의 안전과 인민의 안녕을 지켜 방역 전초선과 재복구 전선에서 용감히 싸우고 있습니다. 우리 군대는 이처럼 적대 세력들의 군사적 위협뿐만 아니라 방역과 자연과의 투쟁과 같은 돌발적인 위협에도 국가 방위의 주체로서 자기 임무를 훌륭히 수행하고 있습니다. 우리 국가와 인민에 대한 그들의 열렬한 중요심에 최대의 경의를 드리며 전군의 모든 장병들에게 뜨거운 감사를 보냅니다. 또한 자기들이 피해복구 건설 임무를 완수하고도 사랑하는 집이 있는 평양행을 택하지 않고 스스로들 또 다른 피해복구 지역으로 발걸음들을 옮긴 애국자들, 마땅히 이 자리에 있어야 할 우리의 핵심들, 나의 가장 믿음직한 수도당원 사단 전투원들에게도 전투적 고무와 감사의 인사를 보냅니다. 그리고 전국의 모든 근로자들에게 전투적 인사와 감사를 보냅니다. 자연의 재난을 털고 새마을 새집들의 보금자리를 편 세대들과 온 나라 가정들의 행복과 기쁨만이 깃들기를 축원합니다. 우리 어린이들에게 언제나 푸른 꿈이 펼쳐지기를 바랍니다. 이 자리를 빌어 지금 이 시각도 악성 비루스에 의한 병화와 싸우고 있는 전 세계의 모든 이들에게 따뜻한 위로의 마음을 보내며 진심으로 마음속 깊이 모든 사람들의 건강이 제발 지켜지고 행복과 웃음이 지켜지기를 간절히 바랍니다. 사랑하는 남녘의 동포들에게도 따뜻한 이 마음을 정히 보내며 하루빨리 이 보건 위기가 극복되고 북과 남이 다시 두 손을 마주 잡는 날이 찾아오기를 기원합니다. 동지들, 오늘 우리 모두는 일심전력하여 마련한 값진 성과와 노력적 열매들을 안고 10월의 경축광장에 모였습니다. 우리가 여기에 오기까지는 정말 쉽지 않았습니다. 간고한 투쟁의 연속이었고 수없이 많은 경난들을 이겨내야 했습니다. 지나온 우리 당의 75성상이 다 그러하였지만 특별히 올해는 정초부터 하루하루 한 걸음 한 걸음이 예상치 않았던 엄청난 도전과 장애로 하여 참으로 간구하고 힘겨웠습니다. 우리는 그 모든 것을 용감히 이겨내고 자랑스럽고 떳떳한 마음으로 뜻깊은 이 자리에 섰습니다. 세인이 경탄할 이 화폭 자체가 우리를 괴롭히고 막아나섰던 온갖 재앙들이 제압되고 우리가 내세웠던 정의로운 투쟁 목표들이 빛나게 달성되었음을 보여주고 있습니다. 친애하는 동지들, 오늘 우리는 우리 당의 75번째 생일을 성대히 맞이하고 있습니다. 세상에는 우리처럼 자기 당의 생일을 전체 인민이 기쁨의 명절로 대경사의 날로 성대히 경축하는 나라는 없습니다. 온 나라의 마음이 뜨겁게 굽이치는 이처럼 벅차고 환희로운 밤 이 자리에 서고 보니 전체 인민에게 무슨 말씀부터 드렸으면 좋을지 모르겠습니다. 우리 당이 걸어온 영광 넘친 75년사를 갈피갈피 돌이켜보는 이 시각, 오늘 이 자리에 서면 무슨 말부터 할까 많이 생각도 해보았지만 진정 우리 인민들에게 터놓고 싶은 마음속 고백, 마음속 진정은 고맙습니다 이 한마디뿐입니다.
We're going to be providing some food that Jeongmin very emotional, facing difficult times, realizing that the soldiers of North Korea have been working very, very hard on various projects. We're going to go back to him right now.
정말 고맙습니다. 이 말씀은 꼭 드리고 싶었습니다. 한 명의 악성 비루스 피해자도 없이 모두가 건강해 주셔서 정말 고맙습니다. 세상을 무섭게 휩쓸고 있는 몹쓸 전염병으로부터 이 나라의 모든 이들을 끝끝내 지켜냈다는 이 사실, 우리 당이 응당마땅히 해야 할 일이었고 응당한 성과라 해야겠지만도 왜서인지 지켜냈다는 이 감격의 기쁨에 눈앞이 흐려지고 모두가 건강하신 모습을 배우니 고맙습니다 이 말밖에 할 말을 더 찾을 수가 없습니다. 세상이 놀라지 않을 수 없는 오늘의 이 승리는 우리 인민들 스스로가 이루어낸 위대한 승리입니다. 우리 당에 있어서 인민들 한 사람 한 사람의 생명은 그 무엇보다 소중하며 전체 인민이 건재하고 건강해야 당도 있고 국가도 있고 이 땅의 모든 것이 다 있습니다. 그런데 이 세계에는 귀중한 우리 인민의 삶을 위협하고 해치려는 불안정한 요소가 너무나도 많습니다. 그래서 사실 연초부터 세계적인 보건위기가 도래하고 주변 상황도 좋지 않아 고민도 컸고 두려움도 컸습니다. 허나 우리 인민은 억척같이 뻗치고 일어나 당과 국가가 취하는 조치들을 절대적으로 지지하고 따라주며 자신들의 운명을 완강히 지켜냈을 뿐 아니라 활기 넘친 모습으로 모진 고난과 시련을 강하게 이겨냈습니다. 서로서로 걱정해주고 위해주고 감싸 안아주는 아름다운 인민, 이런 인민이 높은 애국심과 고도의 자각성을 가지고 서로 협력하며 살아가는 사회주의가 아니었다면 무서운 재앙을 막아내지 못하였을 것입니다. 우리 인민 모두가 스스로 방역의 주체가 되어 국가와 자기들 스스로를 지키고 우리 아이들을 지키기 위한 투쟁에 한 사람같이 떨쳐나섰기에 모든 것이 부족하고 뒤떨어진 나라의 방역 부분이 일도속에 되었고 남들 같으면 상상할 수도 없는 방역 안정 형세를 유지할 수 있었습니다. 아직 풍족하게 살지는 못해도 화목한 대가정을 이루고 단 한 명의 악성 비루스 피해자도 없이 모두가 건강하니 이것이 얼마나 고맙고 얼마나 큰 힘이 되는지 모르겠습니다. 국가가 당하는 어려운 상황을 깊이 이해해주고 자기 집일처럼 떠맡는 고마운 인민도 이 세상에 우리 인민밖에는 없습니다. 지금 이 행성의 가혹하고 장기적인 제재 때문에 모든 것이 부족한 속에서도 비상방역도 해야 하고 혹심한 자연 피해도 복구해야 하는 엄청난 도전과 난관에 직면한 나라는 우리나라뿐입니다. 이 모든 시련은 두말할 것 없이 우리 매 가정, 매 국민들에게 무거운 짐으로, 아픔으로 되고 있습니다. 하지만 오히려 가사보다 국사를 앞에 놓고 국가가 겪는困난을 10가지든 100가지든 함께 걸머지며 성실한 땀과 노력으로 이 나라를 굳건히 받드는 고마운 애국자들이 바로 우리 인민입니다. 그래서 우리 당은 나라의 형편을 터놓으면 언제나 산악같이 일떠서는 인민을 믿고 인민에게 의거하여 모든 국난을 타개해 나가고 있는 것입니다. 늘 우리 인민들은 우리 당에 고마워했지만 정녕 고마움의 인사를 받으셔야 할 주인들은 바로 위대한 우리 인민입니다. 우리 인민은 75성상 일편단심 우리 당을 받들고 성스러운 혁명 위협을 자기의 피와 땀을 아낌없이 서슴없이 바쳐 지켜주었습니다. 가장 간고하고도 시련에 찬 혁명의 길을 헤쳐온 우리 당이 이 피어린 여정을 승리와 영광으로 수놓을 수 있은 근본 비결은 다름 아닌 우리 인민이 당을 진심으로 믿어주고 따르며 우리 당의 위협을 지켜주었기 때문입니다. 언제나 현명한 스승이 되어 지혜와 슬기를 주었고 무한한 힘과 용기를 안겨주었으며 결사적으로 옹의하고 성심으로 받들어주며 당의 구상과 노선을 빛나는 현실로 만들어준 역사의 전능한 창조자인 위대한 우리 인민을 떠나서 어찌 우리 당의 영광 넘친 75년사에 대하여 한순간인들 생각할 수 있겠습니까? 당에서 대고조를 호소하면 천리마를 타고 호응했고 대건설을 작전하면 속도전으로 화답했으며 당의 결심을 몰부를 가림없이 무조건 실천해내고야만 하는 위대한 인민이 항상 곁에 있었기에 우리 당은 언제나 든든하였고 어떤 국경 속에서도 이 땅에 기적의 년년을 새겨올 수 있었습니다. 나는 진함없는 충효심과 굴할 줄 모르는 투지, 성실한 노력으로서 세상 풍파를 다 뚫고 넘으며 위대한 10월 명절을 승리의 단상에 떠올린 우리 인민의 모습에서 앞으로 75년이 아니라 750년, 7500년이라도 당을 따르고 지켜줄 하늘 같은 힘을 온몸으로 뿌듯이 받아안게 됩니다. 동지들, 하늘 같고 바다 같은 우리 인민의 너무도 크나큰 믿음을 받아안기만 하면서 언제나 제대로 한 번 보답이 따르지 못해 정말 면목이 없습니다. 제가 전체 인민이 신임 속에 위대한 수령님과 위대한 장군님의 위협을 받들어 이 나라를 이끄는 중책을 지니고 있지만 아직 노력과 정성이 부족하여 우리 인민들이 생활상 어려움에서 벗어나지 못하고 있습니다. 그럼에도 우리 인민들은 언제나 나를 믿고 나를 절대적으로 신뢰하고 나의 선택과 결심을 그 무엇이든 지지하고 받들어주고 있습니다. 설사 그것이 더 큰 고생을 각오해야 하는 것이라 할지라도 나와 우리 당에 대한 인민의 믿음은 언제나 무조건적이고 확고부동한 것으로 되고 있습니다. 이렇듯 강렬하고 진정 어린 믿음과 고무 격려는 나에게 있어서 그 어떤 명예와도 바꿀 수 없고 수억만 금에도 비길 수 없는 가장 소중한 제부이며 두려움과 불가능을 모르게 하는 무한대한 힘입니다. 이 세상 그 누구도 바랄 수 없는 최대의 신임이 있기에 나는 멸사복무의 사명감과 의지를 가다듬으며 무수한 도전들을 주저없이 맞받아 나갈 수 있었고 전쟁까지 각오해야 하는 결사전에도 나설 수 있었으며 사상 초유의 대재앙에도 강력히 대처할 수 있었습니다. 이런 훌륭한 우리 인민을 섬기고 모시고 투쟁하는 것을 무상의 영광으로 간직하겠습니다. 나는 우리 인민의 하늘 같은 믿음을 지키는 길에 설사 몸이 찢기고 부서진다 해도 그 믿음만은 목숨까지 바쳐서라도 무조건 지킬 것이고 그 믿음에 끝까지 충실할 것을 다시 한번 이 자리에서 엄숙히 확언합니다. 존경하는 나라 전체 인민들 여러분, 정말 고맙습니다. 우리 수령님과 장군님의 마음까지 합쳐 온 나라 전체 인민들에게 경건한 마음으로 고마움에 차넘치는 진정 정중히 삼가 올립니다. 동지들, 우리 인민을 억척으로 지키고 더 높이 떠받들며 부름없이 잘 살게 하는 것은 나와 우리 당의 제일 사명이고 확고부동한 의지입니다. 우리 당은 이미 우리 인민이 존엄이고 생명인 사회주의를 굳건히 수호하고 우리 인민이 영원히 전쟁을 모르는 땅에서 자자손손 번영할 수 있게 평화수호를 위한 최강의 군력을 비추게 놓았습니다. 위풍당당히 정렬한 오늘의 이 열병 대오는 조선노동당이 자기의 혁명군대를 어떻게 키웠는지 또한 그 군대의 위력이 얼만큼 강한지 똑바로 알 수 있게 할 것입니다. 불과 5년 전 바로 이 장소에서 진행된 당 창건 이른돌 경축 열병식과 대비해보면 누구나 잘 알 수 있겠지만 우리 군사력의 현대성은 많이 더 변했으며 그 발전의 속도를 누구나 쉽게 가늠해 볼 수 있을 것입니다. 우리는 자기 당의 혁명 사상으로 튼튼히 무장하고 자기 혁명利益에 전적으로 복무하는 충실하고 강력한 국방과학기술대군과 군수노동계급을 가지고 있습니다. 우리의 군사력은 그 누구도 넘보거나 견주지 못할 만큼 발전하고 변했습니다. 우리가 직면하고 있거나 맞다둘 수 있는 그 어떤 군사적 위협도 충분히 통제 관리할 수 있는 억제력을 갖추었습니다. 우리의 군사력은 우리식, 우리의 요구대로, 우리의 시간표대로 그 발전 속도와 질과 량이 변해가고 있습니다. 우리 당은 우리 국가와 인민의 자주권과 생존권을 건드리거나 위협을 줄 수 있는 세력은 선제적으로 제압할 수 있는 군사적 능력을 제일 확실하고 튼튼한 국가 방위력으로 규정했으며 그를 실천할 수 있는 군사력 보유에 모든 것을 다해왔고 지금 이 순간에도 부단한 갱신 목표들을 점령해 가고 있습니다. 우리는 적대 세력들에 의해 지속적으로 가중되는 핵 위협을 포괄하는 모든 위험한 시도들과 위협적 행동들을 억제하고 통제 관리하기 위하여 자의적 정당 방위 수단으로서의 전쟁 억제력을 계속 강화해 나갈 것입니다. 국가의 자주권과 생존권을 지키고 지역의 평화를 수호하는 데 이바지할 우리의 전쟁 억제력이 결코 남용되거나 절대로 선제적으로 쓰이지는 않겠지만 만약 그 어떤 세력이든 우리 국가의 안전을 다쳐놓는다면 우리를 겨냥해 군사력을 사용하려 든다면 나는 우리의 가장 강력한 공격적인 힘을 선제적으로 총동원하여 응징할 것입니다. 나는 우리의 군사력이 그 누구를 겨냥하게 되는 것을 절대로 원치 않습니다. 우리는 그 누구를 겨냥해서 우리의 전쟁 억제력을 키우는 것이 아님을 분명히 합니다. 우리 스스로를 지키자고 키우는 것뿐입니다. 만약 힘이 없다면 두 주먹을 부러지고도 흐르는 눈물과 피만 닦아야 할 것입니다. 우리 당은 강력한 군사력으로 나라의 주권과 우리 영토의 믿음직한 안전을 보장하며 국가와 인민의 영원한 안녕과 평화와 미래를 수호해 나갈 것입니다. 동지들, 조선노동당의 혁명사상으로 무장하고 조국과 인민에게 무한히 중요하며 우리 인민의 힘과 넋이 있던 강력한 최신 무기들로 장비한 혁명 무력이 있기에 그 어떤 침략 세력도 절대로 신성한 우리 국가를 넘볼 수 없으며 조선인민의 앞길을 감히 막지 못합니다. 이제 남은 것은 우리 인민이 더는 고생을 모르고 유족하고 문명한 생활을 마음껏 누리게 하는 것입니다. 우리 당은 인민들의 복리를 증진시키고 더 많은 혜택을 안겨줄 우월한 정책과 시책들을 변함없이 실시하고 끊임없이 늘려나갈 것이며 인민들이 꿈속에서도 그려보는 부흥번영의 리상사회를 최대로 앞당겨 올 것입니다. 지금까지 우리 당은 혹독한 고난 속에서 인민들과 생사운명을 같이 하면서 그리고 우리 인민의 단결된 힘을 체득하는 과정을 통하여 앞으로 우리가 무엇을 해야 하는가에 대하여 잘 알게 되었습니다. 조선노동당 제8차 대회는 그 실현을 위한 방략과 구체적인 목표를 제시하게 될 것이며 인민의 행복을 마련해 나가는 우리 당의 투쟁은 이제 새로운 단계로 이행하게 될 것입니다. 우리가 일떠설수록 온갖 반동 세력들이 더 기승을 부리고 예상치 않았던 난관들도 닥쳐들 수 있지만 이때까지 우리가 겪은 시련에 비하면 아무것도 아니며 우리에게는 그 모든 것을 격파할 힘이 있고 자신심이 있습니다. 장구한 투쟁 노정에서 다져진 당과 인민 대중의 일심 단결이 있고 우리 사회주의가 키워내고 마련한 인재 역량과 자립에 미쳐는 분명 우리의 전진을 주동하고 가속하는 강력한 힘으로 작용할 것입니다. 남들이 겪어보지 못한 무수한 고난과 시련의 고비들을 넘어오면서 남들이 엄두도 낼 수 없는 모든 것을 다 해낸 우리 당과 인민은 더 큰 용기와 신심, 비상한 열정과 각오를 가지고 새로운 발전과 번영회로의 진군을 시작할 것입니다.
At the moment, as you probably saw earlier, quite emotional. We're just going to go back to him now.
우리 인민을 위하여, 인민들에게 더 좋은 내일을 안겨주기 위하여 무진 애를 쓰며 정성을 다해 일해 나가도록 더더욱 엄격한 요구성을 제기하고 투쟁하도록 하겠습니다. 우리 인민의 리상은 위대하며 그 리상이 실현될 날은 꼭 옵니다. 위대한 그 리상을 실현함에 총력을 다해 나감으로써 사회주의 건설의 더 높은 목표를 점령해 나가는 길에서 누구나 체감할 수 있는 혁신과 발전, 실질적인 변화를 이룩하도록 하겠습니다. 동지들, 우리는 강해졌으며 시련 속에서 더욱 강해지고 있습니다. 시간은 우리 편에 있습니다. 모두 다 사회주의 휴양한 미래를 향하여 새로운 승리를 쟁취하기 위하여 힘차게 싸워 나갑시다.
So Kim Jeongmin is talking about the grave economic problems afflicting the DPRK right now, or North Korea. COVID-19 problems, the country is totally isolated. He's back. We will continue. One moment.
그리고 변함없이 우리 당을 믿어주시는 마음들의 충심으로 감사를 드립니다. 위대한 우리 인민 만세!
Saying North Koreans should live forever. Manse. And you can see the fireworks going off in Pyongyang. Just a reminder, this is taped late last night, probably around almost 1 a.m. I'd say by this stage, given the tape's been rolling almost an hour since the broadcast started. Now, Kim Jong-un's speech is over. I'm going to pass the mic over to Jeongmin Kim, who is our sole correspondent here at NK News. She's been carefully transcribing everything so far and can give us a brief summary of what's being said.
I had a rough transcription just now. The main theme of today's Kim Jong-un speech was how much hardship North Korea has been going through this year, including COVID-19 prevention efforts, flood damages, and multiple typhoons. And they also mentioned sanctions, that amid all this, because of sanctions, their economy suffered and their people suffered. But that Kim Jong-un and the Workers' Party of Korea will work hard to bring the quote-unquote ideal society for the North Korean people. That's Ri Chun-hee. So yes, the main theme was how much hardship they have been going through, and Kim Jong-un led his speech starting with how sorry he feels for the soldiers of the country. If you have been following North Korea news for the past few weeks and months, because North Korea suffered from typhoons and floodings, Kim Jong-un ordered the soldiers to actually go to those places to reconstruct the towns, which they claim that they actually did in some places. So he was thanking them, and he was shedding tears for how much hard work their soldiers have been, how much effort their soldiers have been pouring on these projects, and how it aches him that they couldn't be here because they were still at the recovery projects. Another emotional moment for Kim Jong-un's speech that evening was that he said that he's so grateful for the North Korean people for staying alive and not contracting COVID-19. He claimed that no North Korean person has contracted COVID-19, and he was very much relieved that the country was not the country did not suffer actual confirmed COVID-19 cases. Also, if you have been following news, you could see that WHO has been actually just echoing North Korean government's argument that there has been no confirmed cases despite thousands of testings going on in North Korea. Another important part was that Kim Jong-un actually mentioned South Korea. It only has been weeks since Kim Jong-un personally apologized for the death of the South Korean worker in North Korean waters. Although he did not mention that incident, he said something very similar to the letter he sent to President Moon in early September. In the speech for the October 10th anniversary, this time he mentioned that he hopes everybody around the world stays healthy and overcomes COVID-19, including South Korea, and how he extends his warm greetings to the compatriots in South Korea. And he hopes for a day that South Korea and North Korea could hold hands again. After they overcome all that. That kind of warm message towards South Korea, it has been a while. We saw something like that since Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un met before on the Paektu mountain.
So right now we're seeing the flags being raised to the sound of music. This is what happens at the very start of North Korean military parades every single year. So it's a sign that the actual military parade aspect is about to begin imminently. As Kim Jong-un looks down, it looks like with Hyun Sung-wol, the picture's a little blurry, but he's ready to observe the parade. You can see some pilots here. This is very unusual to see these edited scenes of pilots getting ready to get into use. Are these MiG-29s? Can you fill us in?
Yes, these are MiG-29s, the North Korean MiG-29s, and I also saw some Sukhoi 25s. Those are basically the two most advanced aircraft which North Korea possesses. And they then shot past some Romeo-class submarines, which are Soviet-era submarines, which are still some of the largest submarines the North Koreans use.
So yeah, it looks like they're showing the tape of the pilots getting ready, because about 15-20 minutes into these parades we normally see flybys, low flying aircraft. You'll get the MiGs and the Sukhois doing a low fly formation, and then normally you'll see some propeller planes blowing smoke in colors, or depicting the numbers of the year of the anniversary, which is 75 this time. So it looks like, the production here is really significantly evolved compared to the last two military parades I've seen. Not just the way the square has been renovated and is being lit in a much brighter fashion than we've ever seen, but also the cinematography. It almost seems like this has been done with a kind of Hollywood style in mind. Ankit, have you any thoughts on how this is going to be going down in DC with viewers perhaps like Trump who might be tuning in?
That's true. It is around the American president's time to wake up early in the day. I suspect the news will filter in as the day goes on. Given that this is taking place early, a lot of Washington will be waking up on a Saturday to learn about whatever North Korea is about to show off. But I suspect it will have the effect of raising North Korea on the diplomatic agenda here. It has started to drift down, particularly as the U.S. enters the final stretch of the election. But if Kim Jong-un was hoping to have that effect, I suspect this intriguingly produced parade will have that effect.
So one thing we've been wondering about today, as the day went on and video was still absent, we were wondering, is it possible the North Koreans may not actually release this video? Would it be more in Kim Jong-un's interest to be ambiguous about military capabilities so close to a US election? What kind of strategic tactical gains in DPRK-US relations do you think the North Koreans will get, Ankit, by revealing significant military capabilities, potentially new strategic weapons, so close to an election where presumably they want to try and keep warm relations with Donald Trump, but we don't know. So yeah, I'm just curious, what's the value that North Korea gets from this with the US DPRK relationship?
I mean, I think the logic for diplomacy is similar to the purpose of conducting missile tests in 2017. It's a reminder that North Korea continues to expand and refine its nuclear forces, and if the U.S. is interested in stopping that progress or stopping that growth, then they will come to the table and do a deal with North Korea that will cap that, and whatever North Korea wants in exchange for that, it should get effectively. So what we're seeing with this parade, I mean, if there is an external purpose, I mean, I happen to think a lot of what we're seeing today does have a very strong internal messaging component, as we just saw from Kim Jong-un. But for the purposes of the outside world and for the United States, it is a reminder that the longer the U.S. waits, that North Korea will continue to grow. That time is not on the side of the United States.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think Joost, you've got a comment here.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting to note that these vehicles you're seeing the North Korean general standing in, these are being shown for the first time. As in, during the last parade, they showed us some of these infantry mobility vehicles, heavily armored jeeps, and they were new then too. These are of a new type. So they're showing us that they are ramping up production of such armored vehicles, which are also seeing in a lot of Western countries, of course, or modern militaries across the world.
And we're also seeing white horses. Jeongmin, any comments on that?
Horses, which showed up in the trade data, and maybe that points to how they were actually using that for the military parade. We are not sure as of now if they used those horses before. Anybody who can comment on that?
Yeah, I've not seen the white horses, I believe, in the military parades before, so that does look like it could be a new development. Now, you'll have heard us talking earlier on about Kim Jong-un being emotional about the state of the economy, what's going on in North Korea broadly. Just for those of you who are unfamiliar, this has been a really tough year for North Korea. We've seen the country under chronic sanctions since 2017, which former US ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, in 2017 said would basically prevent North Korea exporting almost 90% of the value of its entire normal exports. On top of that, we have the COVID outbreak, which is stopping all transport, cargo, to a large extent, in and out of the country. That's having a huge impact on North Korea's economy. We know that's effectively stopped the Chinese tourism industry, which just a couple of years ago, in fact, last year we estimated around between 300 to 600,000 Chinese tourists a year. And on top of that, two other sets of problems. We've had really grave weather this year in Korea, particularly in August. And we've seen 3 back-to-back typhoons, 2 of which really hit the north pretty badly. We saw flooding. And if that wasn't enough, we've seen Kim Jong-un several times this year complain and berate his own officials for economic mismanagement, corruption, things like that. So you add this all together, and there's no end in sight right now for COVID or the sanctions, and you can start to understand why Kim Jong-un may be upset to a degree about the performance of his leadership, because just 4 or 5 years ago at the 2016 7th Congress, Kim Jong-un was talking up a new 5-year economic plan. We were expecting to see that pay dividends for the North Korean economy. It's not worked out very well. A lot of large state economic projects have stalled or are frozen in incomplete states. And the really interesting thing, I guess, will be to see how, if those problems translate into military problems. Ankit, we haven't seen missile tests for a long time. Do you think that could be potentially due to these economic problems translating into obstacles for the military?
Not necessarily. They simply might not be in a position where the developmental advantages are worthwhile with testing right now. We should note that we have seen a resumed testing campaign beginning in 2019 and carrying into early this year. But notably, that has involved the testing of systems that North Korea has presented to the outside world as non-nuclear, with the exception of one test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile. When North Korea does test, it anticipates, particularly of the strategic long-range systems, it anticipates external costs, potentially in the form of sanctions. The Trump administration, I think, showed that after the SLBM tests last October, that wasn't really a risk anymore for North Korea. So it is possible that they may return to testing. But just in terms of the calendar, what we notice in the Kim Jong-un era is that testing tends to wrap up, with a few exceptions, by October. So the months of November, December, and ultimately January tend to be a little bit slower for missile testing.
Okay, and Joost, tell us what you're seeing. There's lots of new military capabilities here. What's standing out to you so far?
Yeah, really. From the lineup that they were just showing us, I can see a variety of types that have never before been shown. So absolutely tons of the roughly 600 millimeter oversized rocket systems, which they've shown tested a year or two back. But also new air defense systems, what seemed like new main battle tanks, really all across the range, new and very modern looking equipment.
Am I right in thinking the camouflage on some of these has changed as well? Or is it the light?
That might be the lighting. As far as I can tell, this army drab green is pretty common.
And my colleague Colin Zverko, who you can follow on Twitter, he says he spotted some Pukguksong 3 solid fuel missiles. Has anyone else seen those?
Had not spotted them yet, but perhaps.
I spotted a range of Pukguksong 2 medium-range ballistic missiles. Those are the ones that have been in mass production since the diplomacy began with North Korea, so I'm actually quite curious to see how many we'll see. It looked like to me they might have as many as at least 8 in a lineup. That wouldn't be shocking, but I'm curious to see if there's more.
And these are important because which city do they have in range that most people don't think about, Ankit?
Yeah, so the Pukguksong 2 is basically a system that allows North Korea to hold all U.S. facilities in South Korea and Japan's main 4 islands, so not Okinawa, at risk. And so, the North Koreans have conducted military exercises with the Pukguksong 2 and missiles of similar range, showing that, they have the capabilities to strike specific facilities, including Iwakuni, a base in Japan where the U.S. Marine Corps is based. So it is a significant capability. It is a solid propellant missile, so it's much more responsive compared to North Korea's older liquid propellant Scud missiles. So it is a capability that they feel is an important contributor to their nuclear deterrent.
And if memory serves, the first time this was tested was in February 2017. And at the time, I seem to remember it was a day where there was some kind of large-scale Chinese political gathering. Relations between the two countries weren't going very well. And some analysts pointed out that the roughly 1,000-kilometer range could also hit Beijing, and that might be part of the message.
I remember that. Yeah, I think the North Koreans actually broadcast some footage from space when the missile was on its lofted flight trajectory. That was one of the first times they showed an image of the Earth taken from the reentry vehicle of the Pukguksong 3 of the Pukguksong 2, and you could see part of China. I'm not sure that was part of the messaging, but yes, I believe it was around the time of the first Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. So it was inopportune timing for China.
Yeah, I seem to remember some other tests that year which took place on the dates of Chinese political gatherings. I think one was something relating to leaders in Africa. I was in Beijing at the time, and I remember Tiananmen Square was closed off in anticipation of this gathering, and we got to the airport the day after the test, and I remember reading on the plane back to Seoul, I think it was People's Daily, and there was zero coverage whatsoever of this North Korean missile test that had clashed on the exact same day as this political gathering in Beijing. So yeah, those were the days when relations between China and North Korea not so good. We have been hearing, though, very unverified reports in the Daily NK, which is another publication focusing on North Korea here in Seoul, that while no foreign diplomats are being allowed to attend this event, that there has been a very special exception made for Chinese diplomats who have apparently been allowed to enter the country without thermometer, etc. As I said, it's completely unverified. All of our sources have not been able to confirm this, but if true, it would be reflective of a really warming relationship that we've seen between China and North Korea since the outbreak of diplomacy in January 2018. You'll remember in 2017 there was a lot of tension around the peninsula, and when January kicked off in 2018, the first place Kim Jong-un went to visit was China, to visit Xi Jinping. I think he was there for his actual birthday around January 8th, 2018. And that all culminated in President Xi Jinping visiting Pyongyang in June last year, which was a really very significant visit with lots of pomp and splendor. And yeah, the relationship has sort of been evolving ever since. Jeongmin, you've told us a little bit about the South-North relationship. How would you describe it at the moment?
In general, well, we should remember that there was a very important escalation of tensions in June when they blew up the Inter-Korean Liaison Office. After that, although Kim Jong-un suspended military actions against South Korea, which was, by the way, it seemed like Kim Yo-jong's project, it was pretty quiet for a few months. But then just last month, a few weeks ago, because of the shooting and killing incident in the North Korean waters, it almost escalated again. But right afterwards, because the United Front Department, which is in charge of South Korea affairs in North Korea, they explained their version of the story. Although it was a little bit different, it involved some apologies in South Korea just day after they issued very strongly worded statement. They reverted back to saying that they take Kim Jong-un's apology sincerely. After that, it was military acted fast enough when the South Korean government worker somehow floated into the North Korean waters, and it's still contested if he was indeed defecting to North Korea or not, as the North Korean side did not explain that part of the story. While I have the mic, let me explain just a little bit what Kim Jong-un in his speech mentioned about military power. We are seeing all these soldiers marching and weaponries in the military parade right now. And Kim Jong-un's logic for arranging all this is that he wants to show the people and the world that for the past 5 years, since the 70th anniversary military parade, how much they have developed and how much modernized their weaponry has become. And he directly said that if you quote unquote, if you compare it to the 70th anniversary military parade, you will clearly see. So this is definitely something meant for the outside world to see. as well. Another important, interesting thing that he mentioned about military power is that North Korea currently has the deterrent to control and manage any and all military threats that North Korea is facing. Kim Jong-un did not mention any specific countries like United States or South Korea or Japan or whatever, but this was very similar to what Kim Jong-un has been saying in the December plenum. Kim Jong-un said that whoever tries to attack us preemptively, we will do the same thing using our if they notice it, they will use their strong military power to punish them. Although Kim Jong-un made a disclaimer that their improvement of military power is for defense purposes and the war deterrent is for the self-protection, and that they will try as hard as they can not to use them preemptively. He mentioned nuclear threats as well, although also not referring to any specific countries. And he also mentioned that it seemed like he's trying to stay low-key a little bit about this. He said that the military power that North Korea is trying to develop, it's not for the sake of targeting anybody else, but it's just for the sake of deterrent. So all in all, to me, it seems that Kim Jong-un tried not to stay away from being overly provocative, it seems.
Ankit, a few thoughts on that nuclear doctrine?
Yeah, so we've been trying to piece together North Korea's precise nuclear doctrine from a range of sources. There's a 2013 law that codifies a bunch of things about the conditions under which North Korea might use nuclear weapons. We have information on targeting from not only various missile tests, but other propaganda events, most famously in 2013, when North Korea released, quote, the map of death that showed a number of targets in the United States. But it's interesting to hear Kim Jong-un, rule out things like a preemptive strike. There has been some confusion in the past about North Korea potentially declaring, no first use, that it wouldn't use nuclear weapons first. I think that that's a little overstated. The North Koreans tend to emphasize a negative security assurance, so they claim that they will never use nuclear weapons against a state that doesn't have nuclear weapons and a state that isn't allied with a state that has nuclear weapons. So that's bad news for South Korea and Japan, who do benefit from American extended deterrence. But it's an interesting choice of language that I think, as Jeongmin correctly says, messages, that's a useful message internally, codifying that the treasured sword, the nuclear deterrent, remains capable and remains well-honed, but it doesn't explicitly threaten the United States. That said, my interpretation of North Korea's doctrine, at least from what I've been able to piece together from a variety of sources, is that they do intend to, they reserve the right to use nuclear weapons first, and really the deterrent value of their nuclear weapons, as far as they perceive it, is very much wound up in that credible ability to deploy nuclear weapons first against whoever their adversaries might be, primarily to stall and degrade the ability by the United States and allies to conduct what North Korea fears will be an invasion of its territory.
Thanks. Now, Joost, you're a specialist of North Korean conventional military technologies, infantry, etc. Talk us through what you're seeing.
Yeah, that's right. What we're seeing is a very broad modernization of these would be presumably like the largest road mobile ICBMs. Of course, you have silo-based ICBMs, which range even far larger in size, but North Korean capabilities in that regard are extremely poorly understood. As far as we can tell, they probably don't operate them, but perhaps they do. But yeah, largest road mobile ICBMs, as far as I can tell at this point.
Yeah, it might be anywhere. And the North Koreans have a unique tendency to, no country has deployed liquid propellant strategic missiles like North Korea has. Countries that deploy liquid propellant ICBMs tend to prefer them to remain in silos for ease of handling. But North Korea continues to show us that they keep going larger and larger. So I would say the two big takeaways are this new strategic weapon that we saw at the end of the parade, and the Pukguksong 4A implying continued solid propellant progress. Those are the two that really stood out to me for at least as far as the strategic forces are concerned.
Now, I've got a few more questions for you both, and Jeongmin, my colleague sitting next to me. But just a reminder for those of you tuning in, we are watching the end credits right now. This is an NK News remix, if you will, of the parade with live commentary from NK Pro contributors, including Ankit, Panda, and Joost Oliemans of Oryx, both of whom will be providing text-based analysis for NK Pro within the next 24 hours, really breaking down everything we have seen. And Jeongmin Kim, as I said, is my colleague who's been here, a Seoul correspondent, sharing translations and views from South Korea. And on that, I just want to go back to you, Ankit. We did see 2 engine tests in December last year. Tell us about the length of the engine burn time and what that might mean for these new Hwasong 16 ICBMs. I don't know what we will call them, but what's your sense on that?
Yes, I mean, first of all, presumably this would be the Hwasong 16. It certainly bears many of the characteristics of the Hwasong 12, Hwasong 14, Hwasong 15 design aesthetic. Appears to be based on the Hwasong 15. Yeah, so we did see, shortly before Kim Jong-un at his speech at the 5th plenary of the 7th Central Committee of the Workers' Party made reference to a new strategic weapon. We saw 2 engine tests at the liquid propellant engine static test stand at Sohae, overseen by the Academy of National Defense Science of North Korea. No images were released, very little information was released, but both tests were described as important. One of the tests had a very long engine burn time, much longer than what would be necessary for a conventional stage in a liquid propellant ICBM. We had a few theories about why that might have been the case. There has been a big focus on reliability in North Korean language and talking about strategic forces. Not only does North Korea care about demonstrating certain capabilities, but it wants to signal that its deterrent is reliable. So it is possible that North Korea was testing the engine that is really at the foundation of these systems, the Soviet-derived RD-250 variant liquid propellant engine that they first tested in March 2017. They may have been testing that engine for a longer burn time to see if certain indigenously manufactured components were holding up to the task. It is also possible that they have introduced a all-new second stage, given that I do have questions about what engine is driving the potential second stage of this ICBM. There is a small possibility that North Korea could be using mixed stages with a solid propellant second stage. But again, this is very speculative. We need much closer analysis to make any kind of definitive assessment. But yes, I think this new strategic weapon and those engine tests very likely were related, given that it certainly was a liquid propellant test. North Korea does not conduct solid propellant engine tests at Sohae. And now we've just seen a new large liquid propellant system. So I think putting 2 and 2 together, those do appear to be related.
Joost, if you were a military planner in South Korea or the United States, what would be concerning you most right now about what we've just seen?
I think we've seen a lot of concerning developments on all fronts, really. The personal equipment of KPA soldiers, it just enhances their fighting capability in general, and thus far the South Koreans could rely on an extensive advantage in this field. I think the North Koreans are trying to close this gap with body armor, etc. But those new long-range anti-tank systems, those can be extremely damaging. We've seen in recent conflicts that large ATGM capabilities translate into high armor losses on the other opposing side. Those new main battle tanks, we don't know how well their production of those is. That will probably need to ramp it up in the future. They could pose a threat to especially older generations of South Korean tanks, of which they have many. The anti-aircraft defense systems they've shown, that could be very concerning. It shows they actually do have the ability to introduce modern systems. whereas the consensus until now had been that well, at least their deployment of those is very limited, and their introduction of new capabilities is very limited. And of course, those tactical and strategic missile systems, they seem to be investing extremely high amounts of resources in those. So all those 600 millimeter rockets which we saw, which are capable of striking nearly the entirety of South Korea, those would all be a grave threat. And I just checked. I think you were correct in saying that the transporter erector launcher of those ICBMs, that they only received 6 of those from China. So that would indeed also indicate they finally mastered some indigenous production of large TELs. Really a pretty big industrial feat for a nation which is crippling. Has a economy that's been crippled by years of mismanagement and sanctions.
Just on that, to give some listeners perspective, Dr. Andrei Lankov, a professor who lived in North Korea and is one of our regular contributors. I mean, he often likens North Korea's economy to that of Mozambique. They fall in a similar place in world rankings in terms of economic power. And I mean, that really goes to show how poor the country is, and yet it's somehow able to accomplish significant developments in a wide range of military areas, putting satellites into orbit, you name it. Jeongmin, how do you think the South Korean president is going to be reacting to this today, given his drive for peace with North Korea at the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics just 2 years ago?
I saw in a lot of the comments whether or not Moon Jae-in or Trump will take these development in North Korean weaponry as provocation. A lot of people were talking about October surprise and whether or not North Korea will make provocative movements before U.S. presidential election. But to Moon, I think, and actually to anybody, provocation, I think it depends on how they want to view it. So because Moon was continuing his pro-engagement movement, despite everything that was going on, the military part of the parade itself wouldn't be that much of a glitch to whatever Moon Jae-in administration was pushing forward for. One thing that really struck my mind was when Kim Jong-un talked about South Korea very directly. It's been a long time since Kim Jong-un personally said anything very nice about South Korea. Since the failure of Hanoi summit, the relations soured between the two Koreas as well, and the escalation of tension. It led to the North Korean statements even talking about dropping out of inter-Korean agreements after losing faith in what South Korea can actually do. But today, Kim Jong-un actually directly mentioned that he is looking forward for that day when South Korea and North Korea can hold hands again. And that's a very symbolic message to Moon Jae-in administration, because they were actually holding hands on Baekdu, right? And these Minjok thing, these Korean people thing, the symbolic messaging, I think it was very much intended, and how Kim Jong-un framed it as a warm greeting about COVID-19 prevention measures. I think it sort of signals that maybe inter-Korean engagement and cooperation may start at one point in the close future as well, because Moon will take this as a signal for North Korea wanting to engage with South Korea as well.
Yeah, and I mean, just personally speaking, I do think this is significant effort and show that we've just seen, and it is going to forcefully remind whoever will become the next president of the United States in November that this issue remains unresolved. And if it is left to the Barack Obama era policy of strategic patience, North Korea has showed us it has a playing card right now, which could result in very significant and worrying testing. We've also heard, of course, in recent years, North Korea talking about testing into the Pacific Ocean. All those things, any new US president, or if President Trump is reelected, will probably want to avoid. With that, as we wrap up, I'd love to hear some final thoughts. Ankit, how about you? Let's hear your concluding analysis.
Yeah, no, I think just to reiterate the point that you made, I mean, the Singapore Declaration, where Kim Jong-un signed his name onto a piece of paper saying that he would work towards the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I think tonight's parade just tells us, I mean, how far we've come just since that summit, and North Korea very much continues to show progress despite all measures taken by the international community to stymie its economy. It remains committed to nuclear weapons as the cornerstone of its national defense. And of course, that's not to underemphasize the new conventional weapons we've seen, but really, I think the big picture here is that North Korea's nuclear forces continue to grow. I mean, this is the 5th ICBM design that we've seen North Korea parade through Kim Il-sung Square. And I think it's quite likely that this one is slated for testing, unlike the first 2 ICBM designs that they showed off in parades. So it looks like the the Hwasong 14, Hwasong 15, and now apparently what may be the Hwasong 16 are going to be the topic of conversation for weeks and months to come.
Joost, what's your assessment overall?
Another one of those North Korean parades that, from an analyst point of view, it leaves you stunned for a while. So many new systems. There's really a lot of analysis ahead to try and figure out how much of these represent immediate improvements in technology, how much of these are just tentative and they'll try to get under control in the near future, and in what numbers. And if you're trying to figure out where they may have procured this technology, you can always find some lineage of weapon systems to other countries. Perhaps there's been sanctions violations. We've got a lot of stuff to figure out here.
Indeed, we do. Jeongmin, any final thoughts?
Overall, to me, it seemed that North Korea, Kim Jong-un especially, a lot of it was for domestic message. I think the message was like, we were going through a lot, but we have we are overcoming that, and despite all of what happened, we have developed these missiles. One thing that stood out to me is that they didn't really mention Pyongyang General Hospital, which was due October 10th, unless I missed anything. But sometimes these construction projects, they are quietly delayed or are finished a little bit afterwards, so we will have to keep an eye on that. Also, I think a lot of language that Kim Jong-un used, it pointed to how they will be gearing up whatever resource they have for the January Party Congress. In the January Party Congress next year, they will be announcing a new 5-year economic plan. So if we have a chance, if we can do something like this again, it will be very interesting to see how they will frame it, because this time it was quite convenient because they had COVID-19 to blame and flood to blame and typhoon to blame. But if they cannot come up with any solid achievements by January, it will be really hard for them to say anything, especially during the New Year's address, if they do anything like that. My final thought is that I'll become very busy. I'm an inter-Korea relations beat reporter, and to me, it seems that a lot of inter-Korean attempts for inter-Korean cooperation, we will see a lot of them in the coming weeks or months. I think Moon will be in a very big dilemma because domestically, a lot of opposition party lawmakers, they're criticizing South Korean administration for being too soft with recent North Korean behaviors. But from Moon Jae-in's perspective, this was a definite olive branch coming from Kim Jong-un. So we'll have to see how it pans out.
I just, thanks all for your comments. All of this just brings me back to Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, who she was commenting about the U.S. Independence Day celebrations back in July, earlier this year. Thinking about it now with the hindsight that we have, it almost seemed like it was sarcastic. We all know President Trump was trying to have a military parade at some point, and she was commenting in that letter to President Trump in her remarks, stating that it would be lovely for him to send a DVD so they could check the US fireworks display. And it really does look tonight or last night like the North Koreans have far eclipsed any US Independence Day celebration I've ever seen. We've seen far more military equipment revealed today than any other parade in DPRK history. And I think this one is going to go down in the history books. On that, I would like to draw a close to this NK News, NK Pro live commentated video cast. I want to thank Ankit, Jeongmin, and Joost especially for all your great commentary. If you are not a subscriber of NK News, sign into the website tomorrow. Join. It doesn't cost much, just a few dollars a week for a standard NK News subscription, and you'll be able to read some of our analysis on this. I want to say a massive thanks to Nils Weissensai, who has devised all the technology for today. It's worked a treat, I think. We couldn't have done it without him. Also want to thank Collins Verco, Michelle Choi, and our editor Kelly Kasulis, all of whom have been working hard today to help with coverage. And last but not least, I want to thank my wife, Julia Jeongmin, for all the support and our new baby Leia. I know I've not been here today, but I hope you understand why. Lots of love. All right, on that, I just want to wrap up and say thanks everyone for tuning in. And yeah, we will be back maybe in Pyongyang next time. Okay, with that, thanks everybody.